Hello, hello, hello. Morning, morning, morning. Right, so getting down to an interesting subject today, the subject of squatting. So, one of my lovely teachers, Julian Baker, was talking about the importance of squatting and hip mobility, which is something that's really high on my list because I specialise in hips, obviously. And I did a workshop a couple of years ago, or probably a bit more than that now, 2018, something like that. And the statistics in 2017 in the UK were quite staggering that we had replaced, and this is a complete replacement, we had replaced 167,000 hips and knees, according to the national survey. And to me, that was absolutely staggering how we were at a point where we were wearing out the joints that give us freedom in our lives. Basically, other joints, if they don't work, yes, they are life limiting and that can be very difficult. But if your leg joints don't work, you're just hamstrung. You can't get out and about. And that's fundamental to life, to our mental health, our physical well-being. The possibilities are endless with that, and that really struck a chord with me. And that was when I started to just change my view on the body, that I was happy to work with necks and shoulders and bad backs and those sorts of things, but hips particularly struck a chord for me. So I've spent many years now just specialising, just focusing on functional feet, the foundation of the body, and why we wear out the hips and the knees all the time. So with that in mind, I wanted to have a look at that today. Why is squatting so important for us? But equally, why is squatting so elusive? It seems to be the most difficult thing, and certainly 80% of the people that I work with, maybe even higher than that, can't squat. We can get in and out of chairs, but anything below chair line is an anomaly, and it's not happening for us. So the thing that Julian was talking about in his video, and if you haven't seen it, I suggest you go over and have a look at functional anatomy and his video on squatting and the practicalities of that. From my point of view, when you're teaching in the class and you've got somebody that can't do the movement, your yoga posture or whatever it is that you're trying to teach them because their hips are stiff, or they've had a hip replaced, or the knees are giving them grief, what do you do with that? And there is this thing in the yoga world that we've got at the moment that they're called hip openers. I don't really know what a hip opener is. It sounds a bit like a can opener, and it's just doesn't sound very nice. Hip openers for me when I was 20 was putting my feet together and my friend in class sitting on my knees and pushing the knees down, and that opened the hips apparently. And what we didn't look at was the body as the functioning whole. What we didn't look at was, why are the hips stiff in the first place? Muscles in the body don't just hang on for no reason at all. And we need to have a look into that. And with my years of working with a range of different people, different ages, different jobs, different life approaches, all of that stuff, it all comes down to the same thing. If your hips are stiff, the feet are stiff too. And, if you look at the video on golf ball rolling, it'll tell you all about foot flexibility, foot mobility, and how having a foot that is as sensitive and as dexterous as your hand is fundamental to the health and well-being of your whole body. So what do? So we get into something like squat pose. Now, squat pose is traditionally taught, and this was Julian, if you're watching, hello, really interesting. The way that we come into squatting is we always stand up and attempt to drop down into this squat. And at this point, from my experience, the hips just come in a little bit like a brick wall and you just stop. It's intensely frustrating. In some cases, it's quite painful. If it's not working the way that it should, then, you know, the knees hurt. It can be really uncomfortable. And if you're in a yoga class or if you're in any exercise class where they're trying to get you to squat, week on week, it can get really disheartening because you just don't feel like you're making the progress that you want to. So with that in mind, we stop looking at the hip as a singular joint. We stop looking at the leg as finishing at the hip. And if you look at the sacral walking, that will tell you all about that. Your leg doesn't finish at your hip. Your leg finishes underneath the ribs. So with that in mind, we start with the non-hurty bit, because obviously in a lot of cases the hips are a little bit painful, so we're not going to do that. So we're going to come into square pose. And what I wanted to talk about when we're here in our all fours pose, and I can't put my camera on landscape because I'm not that technically minded, and I know that Sarah will be laughing her head off at that because I can see her at the bottom of the screen. I will fit into my portrait pose until I figured it out. So when we're in our square pose, have some padding underneath your wrists if your wrists tend to get a little bit grouchy, and fold your mat or get yourself a blanket so that your knees are happy. And we do want happy knees because there's nothing worse than them digging into the ground and just feeling really unpleasant. So if you're starting off like this and we've got the toes and the ankle is not on the ground, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to feel that your big toes are getting pulled away towards the wall behind you and you start to present the ankle to the ground. Now we can tuck the toes under here and we can make nice circles with the heel. And feel that the ankle starts to become nice and flexible. Now, if this is super tight in the sole of your foot, in the front of your ankle, in the front of your shins, that's all you need to do. That's it. This is the start of your squat pose. Because until your feet can connect into the front of your ankle and move around and feel soft there, then you're going to be stuck in your squat pose. So that's all we're going to do. Just make some nice circles there. Eventually, you might find that the heel starts to come down to the ground. The knee might go out to the side. We keep nice upward lift into the underside of the ribs because we want space in the front of the hip. Hi, Justine. We're doing squatting. I think you'll love this. So making space, that's all we want to do. We're not sitting back down into the toes. We want space in the foot, space in the ankle, space in the knee, and space into the hip with nice upward lift into the ribs. And that's all you start with. So if you have had hip replacement, or you're working with students that simply can't get anywhere past, sort of here with their squat pose without the knees being really grouchy, then get your student or your client on the ground, get them padded underneath the knees and the wrists, and get the foot open, because as this part of the foot, the front of the ankle, the deep arch of the foot behind the balls of the feet, as this starts to open up and soften, and you can golf ball roll this as well, it's a nice quick way in. From there, if it's for your own practice, from there, as the feet start to come down, then we've got something that starts to look like squat pose. The heels don't have to go on the floor. That's a fallacy. There's this thing that we have to get the heels down and then, all manner of naughty things happens, and you don't want people rolling over in your class, although it is funny, but, and I've done it myself, it's generally not a good thing. So, foot flexibility. If you're hypermobile, You know who you are. If you're hypermobile and you can sit here and it's all lovely and we're all just very squashy, we don't want to do that either. We don't want to be hanging in the joints. So again, that's where your strength and integrity comes from. And joints wear out not because we're stiff and not because we're overly flexible. It's a lack of integrity and strength within the tissues that surround the joint. So it's just the same. We'll still wear out joints if we're hanging in the joints. So again, we want that strength, that upward lift. Can you stand up in your squat from your squat pose with pelvic floor, central core system underneath the ribs? So I hope that helps. I'm just going to have a quick read. I haven't got my glasses on. I have to run to the beach with great info. Oh, thank you so much, Justine. That's really kind. You can catch it on the replay. I'll post this onto my page anyway. So when you're working with your students, have a look at their feet. I'm really interested when people come through the door for the first time. I want to know what their feet look like, because your feet are the windows into the body. They tell you everything that's going on, everything that you need to know. So have a try with that. Really interested to know, as a yoga teacher, how do you get on with that? How do you feel in your feet? How do you feel in your hips? Pop a comment in for me. Let me know what's a struggle for you. Where are you running into resistance with this? But hopefully that gives you something a bit more accessible for squat pose. We can grow squat pose like a plant. We make good foundations into the ground, into the earth, and then we grow up from there. So if you want to know more about Gravity Technique, you can subscribe to the list. Link is up in the bio. You get a nice free video. It's postural analysis at the moment, I think, as a thank you. And the yoga teachers course starts in September. So if you want to get involved with that, you can pop me a message at kaz@thegravitytechnique.com. And it'd be lovely to hear from you, and just really interested. I want to start the conversation on keeping flexible, keeping mobile, and getting old is just a bit of a myth. So have a lovely day, and let's feel better by moving well. Take care.